Since starting crypto, I've invested in a few different projects that saw incredible gains, over 1000x gains. And do you know what those had in common? They were at one time a project that almost no one in crypto knew about, but had the strength to be over a top 100 project. They had the right teams, the right ideas, and the right problems they were solving. Now, will DevvE make those kind of gains? If I had a magic crystal ball and could see the future, I'd tell you for certain. What I see is all the ingredients for a rocket ship of a success: the right team, the right technology, and the right problems they are solving. After watching some AMA interviews with Austin, I knew I had to invite him. He does such a solid job laying out what DevvE is doing, so you can decide for yourself if DevvE is special. Obviously, I believe so. It is one of my largest holdings in crypto. But this is about you hearing Austin tell you about DevvE. If you are joining us in the chat, I will be asking some questions, but want you to also ask yours. This is about crypto investors having access to ask our questions to a project that hasn't hit mainstream crypto awareness yet, and yet it seems so incredible. Welcome to the Crypto Rain channel and our family. If you, like me, came into crypto because you realize there's potential here for complete life-changing gains over a greater 4 to 8 year period, and you're looking for a discussion on becoming a solid, unshakable crypto investor, you're in exactly the right place and with the right family, the Rainmaker family. Now, the reason I created this channel is because I was a crypto investor, and I was once new to the crypto space 7 years ago. And back then I was looking for a crypto channel and network or a group that understood crypto as an investment and discussed the most important things like the 4-year investment cycle of crypto, specific projects and the pros and cons of those projects, the risks, and guess the upside if it came together well. And I didn't find that. So we created it. And I say we because it's not just me anymore. It's a family of Rainmakers. You can see them here in the chat. You will see some in our free Telegram group. There's a link to that below, and you will definitely find them in our private Patreon group. The private Patreon group is the gateway to access our private Discord. And this private Discord is where the best discussion, best info is. There are many other benefits too that you will have to join us to find out. Do know I'm not a financial advisor. I'm a crypto investor myself. Now I want to introduce our special guest. If you haven't already, make it rain on that like button. Let's welcome Austin from DevvE to the channel. Austin, thank you so much for joining us today.
What's happening, man? That intro got me fired up. You're great at that.
I'm just a crypto investor myself, right? And part of the reason I started this channel, because I realized as a crypto investor, like I didn't get to ask the questions I wanted. There was a project I had $40,000 invested in, and I was trying to ask questions to the team, and their Telegram admin was working for free, didn't know what the hell they were talking about, and I couldn't get past their Telegram admin, even though I had $40,000 invested. And then the CEO of that channel did an AMA with a YouTube channel that had about 1,500 followers on it, and that YouTube channel got to ask all their questions. And I thought, geez, if I'm really going to be serious about being a crypto investor, I need to be able to get better information. And right now I'm beholden to whatever questions they want to ask. What if I created a channel that not only would I get asked my question, but the audience would get to as well, so that we can make better and more informed decisions as investors? Because I think that's what YouTube and crypto should be like. And I didn't see a lot of that, so created that. But I'm just an investor, try to make informed decisions. I hold a ton of DevvE. I'm a big fan in this. But I asked you because I've covered DevvE a number of different times. It's one of my top 5 crypto picks, and that's reflected in my own holdings. I wanted to invite you on so you could share what you see about DevvE, which might be completely different from what I see about it. So for those that don't know what DevvE is, what the hell is DevvE?
Oh man, let's get into it. So DevvE is by far the fastest layer 1 network, period, in the world. We're clocked at 8 million cross shard transactions per second, and I'll get into with you guys exactly what that means. But I want to kind of set the stage a little bit that DevvE is not a network like you're used to. DevvE is not like Solana, Phantom, Polygon, AVAX. Whereas we're not the sort of network where you're going to go, okay, how can I hook up my Phantom or my MetaMask wallet? Where's your local DEX I can swap on? How can I lend some assets in your Aave fork or what have you? DevvE was specifically created from the ground up for enterprise. And I don't know if you just want to let me rip on this. And if you do, I'll go. How did you want to go about it?
Well, yeah, let's go ahead and get into like why it's different. But can we step back for a second and let me ask this question? So DevvE, many might be hearing DevvE for the first time. DevVE's been developing since 2016. That makes it near as old as Cardano in development. Yet, why does almost no one in the crypto space know about it if it can really do 8 million transactions per second, like you said, and so making it the fastest layer one blockchain out there, and it's been in development since 2016. How in the world is that even possible that people don't even know about it yet if it's legitimate?
Yeah, let's get into it. So I definitely have some feelings there. So I came from a very similar environment like you're in right now. I did, I had a fairly large YouTube channel. I came from the DeFi space. Like that was really where I lived. And so when I learned about DevvE, I had to kind of wrap my mind around a few things. Now, the chain has been running since 2018. And when the token launched, it launched back in February. I think we probably saw a market cap of 150 million. We're in a bit of a weird market then. However, when it comes to what we're doing, we are specifically built for enterprise. And as a result of that, and this is something I kind of had to get over the hump on when I first started working here. We do not have a public shard. And the word that I use, shard, just means blockchain, right? DevvE is a blockchain of blockchains. And I'll get into that a little bit once we get into the tech. But because of that, we don't have the sort of touch and feel network that almost everyone else on the market has. Now, on the one hand, you might say, well, if you guys had that, you'd probably had become more popular within the crypto crowd. And that's probably true. And I actually kind of hold that belief as well. However, the deals that we've been knocking down, the doors that we've been knocking on, the places that we've been going, once this all starts to come out, which it's going to here very, very soon, I think you guys are going to see hands down the reason that we did it this way. And so we didn't really have a specific desire to go after the crypto crowd. Crypto will be a little bit of what we do, but we're going after everybody else. And I'll kind of put it like this. If the whole of cryptocurrency is like a swimming pool, that Polygon and Phantom and Avalanche and Solana, they're all vying for the same type of people. Where we're going for is a total addressable market the size of the ocean. It's orders of magnitude bigger. Because what we're not trying to do is create the next great DeFi ecosystem. What we actually have created is a chain that is custom built with the blocking level patents behind it for enterprise, for your large institutions, for the financial companies that underpin the actual world of finance, right? Not the world of finance that we're experiencing here in crypto. And there's a lot of things about crypto that are awesome, right? I love the cypherpunk mentality. I love the, be, not to throw a name out there, but be bankless, right? Don't trust the banks, all that stuff. I love that. But that's not reality when it comes to the real world, right? In the real world, if you're, RWAs are a big talking point right now. Well, if you want something with real world assets, those live in the real world and they have real world regulation backing them. Wow, that was a tongue twister, right? So you've got to have a chain that plays nice with regulation and meets the very, very specific needs that these extremely large organizations have, right? And there's a few needs that they have. Well, I don't know. Am I okay to go ahead and dive into the tech? Because I think I can paint this picture a little bit better if we do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's get into it here. So before I do this, anyone watching, what I want you to think back on is when was the last time you actually onboarded somebody into crypto? And I don't mean like, hey, go buy this token on, Coinbase. I mean, they had a token they wanted to buy, and it was a buddy of yours, and they had never used cryptocurrency before. And of course, because you're a savvy investor, you're a savvy cryptocurrency user, you know that you want self-custody and you want self-custody on a hardware wallet, right? So you help them to buy the token, you help them to set up their ledger, you explain to them how important that mnemonic phrase is, all of these things, right? And why do we do that? Well, we do that because in crypto, one wrong move could lose you everything. Part and parcel, good buddy of mine sent 20,000 DevvE to the DevvE contract the other day. right? He meant to send it to a friend. He sent it to the contract. He hit me up and he goes, hey, I think I sent this to nobody. And I looked at his transaction. I said, you actually sent it to the token contract. And I checked the functions on the contract. We don't have a retrieval function. Those are gone, man. And he goes, wait, you work for the company. You must know somebody who can do this. And I explained to him, I said, this is code executing code. We're done. Like, those aren't coming back. That's the world that we play in. But let me kind of paint a picture about my 70-year-old father, for example. He was my most recent onboard, right? He wanted to buy DevvE. He's like, oh, you work for him. Cool. I'll buy some. How do I do that? Okay. Well, he certainly doesn't know how to use Uniswap, right? So I go to his house. I had him order a ledger before I showed up. We set up the ledger. I help him, kind of understand how important this mnemonic phrase is. And I said, you need to lock this up, right? And so it's sitting right in front of us. And as I look away, he pulls out his cell phone to take a picture of his mnemonic phrase. Now, anyone that's security conscious knows you never put your mnemonic phrase online, period, end of story. It's a bad seed at that point, right? And if anyone watching does that, that's not good. So anyhow, my father's a boomer, right? He's traded in equities for, 30, 40 years. These are the people with the money. But if he can't sleep his head, if he can't lay his pillow, let's try that again. If he can't put his head down on his pillow at night and sleep well because he's not sure if his crypto is safe, this isn't going to be a world that he plays in, right? So he's used to the TD Ameritrade experience. He's used to the Charles Schwab experience. And it would be really funny if we heard one day, yep, TD Ameritrade had their hot wallet hacked and all of the stocks were taken, right? That's just not something that happens in that world. Okay, but when we're talking about real world assets, what are we talking about? So a lot of people like to throw around real estate. Okay, fine. But really what we're talking about equities, which are stocks. We're talking about commodities. We're talking about precious metals, which would be commodities like gold, silver, what have you. To get these actually to avail of blockchain, right? To actually get them on chain, to operate in a legally compliant way, there are some things that you must have in place. The first thing you have to have in place is you have to have privacy. But it's not the same type of privacy that we have with like Monero or Zcash. Those are uncrackable, zero knowledge proof privacy that the government hates. The type of privacy we need is the same type of privacy you have on your debit card. So for instance, if I go down to Chick-fil-A, I wouldn't, terrible. But let's say I did go down to Chick-fil-A, right? And I wanted to buy a chicken sandwich and I swiped my debit card. It would be really weird if the lady behind the register could see everything I had done on my debit card up until that point. That would suck. But in crypto, that is how it is, right? Because of block explorers. If I send you $1, you can look at my wallet and go, look at all the shit coins he just, traded like last month, right? It's pseudonymous, but there's no privacy. And that doesn't work in a lot of regulated industries, especially financial. The second thing that is going to be absolutely necessary is going to be some form of protection for people like my buddy that sent, DevvE to the contract, or my dad who might have taken a picture of his mnemonic phrase and didn't realize he couldn't do that, right? So two things that DevvE have, and we have the blocking level patents on these. We have the first blocking level patent is privacy with auditability. It's the exact same privacy that you get to experience at your bank, for example. So for instance, if you're sending funds around, right, complete privacy. If we get a government subpoena, not us necessarily, whoever the person would be, if a government subpoena is produced, it can be audited at that point. Okay. Now that was one point I really had to get over the hump on because I'm like, that's just not crypto. That doesn't feel like crypto. It feels different. Okay. The second thing, and this is absolutely important, is fraud, theft, and loss protection. So we have something called DevProtect that we also hold the blocking level patents on. And it's the sort of thing where when you create your wallet, and you can liken this to what you'd have with a major stockbroker or exchange. When you create your wallet, you're going to go through a setup process. And through that setup process, it's going to ask you questions to enable your DevProtect if that's something you want to do. So it could be that this is a storage account. So nothing should really be leaving this account. And if anything does, you want the ability to claw it back with the original private key, you can do that. If you lose your private key, you could set up 2 trusted third parties. Maybe it's your wife and an attorney. I don't know if that's a great idea, but having 2 trusted third parties, right, that can go in, pull the funds out and put them in something that you have the key. And there's a ton of different ways that you can do this, like an advanced directive my dad has set up. If he passes away, where do his stocks go? TD Ameritrade knows that, right? They have that information. So these are things that happen in the real world. And essentially what these are, they're bumpers on the bowling lanes, right? They're, okay, we're going to go play in a new area here, but we're going to keep you within the lines, right? And it's not us keeping you within the lines. So, okay, let's continue this slightly. So fairly soon, and I don't want to give you an exact date, even though I know the date, we're going to be announcing a partnership with one of the largest fintech companies in the world. And it's going to be a partnership with something we've dubbed DevvE Exchange. Now, what DevvE Exchange is, it's specifically an exchange. It's not just crypto, but it's an everything exchange. It's crypto, it's equities, it's commodities, it's impact assets, which are like carbon credits. It's real world assets. Now, here's the really interesting thing. There's a lot of kind of secret sauce about the DevvE network that went into us being able to get through this door. And this was actually a relationship we were working on for over a year. It took us a while to get through the door. And these folks have been pitched on, I don't know, 100 different blockchains, right? But we were the only ones to work in such a way that would work with this type of institution. So when it comes down to it, right, the DevvE network is interesting for a number of reasons. One, we're a blockchain of blockchains, meaning we call them shards, but essentially we're multiple different shards. And we have something called a T1 connector, which is really, really important. So the sharding mechanism that we use, you can think of it like, it's called a horizontal scaling solution. And you might have heard of things called like subnets or supernets out there, which are other horizontal scaling solutions. And they're fractured off blockchains that use the same consensus. The difference between what we're doing and what anyone else on the market is doing is this. If you were over on, let's say, Avalanche, and I love Avalanche, so this is not me talking bad about them, and you were, let's say you're a game, and you deploy one of their subnets, right? Because you need 500 transactions per second or something like that. Okay. Then you get your own blockchain, and that's great. And it works well for what you want to do. But let's say you double in size overnight, and now you need a higher throughput. You need 1,000 transactions per second. Well, on a subnet like that, you can't just deploy another one, because what you're going to be forced to do is segment your population, meaning you're going to have to put half on one subnet and half on the other to get the actual throughput that you need. And the reason is because to go from one to the other, you have to go through a bridge. There's no two ways about it. Even if you make it the most simple bridging process in the world, there's still a bridging process. And so you have no unified experience. On DevvE with the T1 connector, we have the ability, and this is part of our secret sauce, but we have the ability to connect all of our shards and give a unified experience. And because each shard is custom built from the ground up, you can choose the algorithm, you can choose the number of validators, you can choose the security, you can choose the throughput. What that means is that we can customize each shard to complete regulatory adherence. Now, when it comes to DevvE Exchange, this is really important. We can go to every single jurisdiction and ask them what regulations they would like on the shard that resides for their population. So when someone comes into DevvE Exchange and they do a KYC, we can put them in the proper shard that they belong in with the proper regulations, but we can still give them the unified experience on the front end. And I'll explain to you what I mean by that. So everyone on here knows Binance, right? And, you know, Binance.com was the monolith for a long time. And then they started having some issues in the United States, but they didn't want to lose the US business necessarily. And so what they did is they opened up Binance US. And I'm in the United States, and I tried to use Binance US. And if you're trading Bitcoin, you might get away with it. But other than that, like, the liquidity sucks. What they had to do is they had to fracture their user base. They said, you guys go over here. Everyone else still trades on main Binance. That was their solution to meeting certain regulatory requirements that were being imposed upon them. We don't have to worry about that. Now, the second thing, and this is something that most people, I would say, in the world are really not familiar with. There's something in the world of finance called counterparty risk. And this is really, really important. If you're trading a stock, let's say on Robinhood, right? When you execute your trade, what's going to happen is you're going to see money leave your account and you're going to believe a stock entered your account. But that's not actually how it works under the hood. Under the hood, there are clearinghouses, and these clearinghouses operate in a time frame of usually T+2. And what T+2 means is the time of execution plus about 2 days. And that's 2 days before they actually settle the stock to the exchange that you traded on. So in that 2-day time, what they're doing is they're floating you what you bought, essentially with a good faith belief that they're going to receive what you purchased from the underlying clearinghouse. Now, back in 2008, you know who else was a clearinghouse? Lehman Brothers. They were a clearinghouse. They had a heck of a lot of counterparty risk on their books. And when they started to go belly up, this was all hands on deck for Wall Street, right? So this is something that is not a small problem. In fact, the DTCC, which is the largest clearinghouse in the United States, they cleared $470 trillion in securities last year. That's a huge number. With DevExchange, we have a really specific type of technology that we hold the patents on. We use these things called contingent transaction sets, which essentially means that the transaction does not execute unless certain parameters are met. We have mathematically instant settlement. And as a result of that, we completely remove all counterparty risk whatsoever. Now, you and I might not see that as a big deal because we're trading in crypto all the time. We really don't experience counterparty risk, but the rest of the world does. And the financial institutions that underpin our world see this as a massive deal. So when we come forth with this, and this is something we're actively working on, this is going to be something that has never been done before. It's going to be something that is completely adherent to all regulations. You'll have the privacy, you'll have the fraud, theft, and loss protection, and we solve a $470 trillion a year issue for major fintech companies. And one of the largest in the world that you're all familiar with is going to be powering this and partnering with us on this. So it's a big deal.
Let me use an example just to see if I'm understanding this correct. So let's just say the partner is, say, Robinhood, because it's an exchange everyone knows. It has some crypto assets, has some stocks and other things, right? But one of the reasons, I don't know if Robinhood's even accessible outside the US, but one of the reasons it might not be because it wouldn't be compliant with, say, European laws or other laws. So in other words, if Robinhood was a partner, essentially they could make different shards for every different country that would be compliant with their laws so that people could get on Robinhood anywhere around the world. So all of a sudden, for the first time, it's globally accessible. And then it would know based on where they did their KYC at, what laws are applicable. And so then they might be able to buy, say they want to buy Tesla stock, say they're in France, they want to be able to buy Tesla stock. If that's available per the laws of France, they would be able to. And second to that, so not only does it create accessibility, like across different borders, create super high transaction fees, but then what you're saying is the counterparty risk is very different from behind the scenes. And the way they make up that counterparty risk is like they just eat the difference. Like say somebody buys Tesla stock at $1 and it takes 2 days to settle and they really end up having to buy those to give to them at $1.06. They eat that price difference until all of a sudden they don't have enough float anymore too. And then that's when they could collapse. But that ends up being a really big cost over time to them, right? To the tune of, I don't know what the exact numbers are, but I've heard that big exchanges, it can be hundreds of millions of dollars per year eating that float, which if all of a sudden there's technology that means that float goes away and they can have access to more countries. That's what you're saying DevExchange is.
So I want to, yes, you did it. You almost explained it perfectly, but in this example, let's say Robinhood was fully tokenized, right? So on Robinhood, there's a lot of paper trading going on. Meaning they kind of act like a casino, right? Remember GameStop, right? They wouldn't let you sell, right? Right. So there's a lot of paper trading going on. But let's say all the stocks were tokenized. And let's say you had full custody of every stock that you purchased instantly. Meaning Robinhood's not holding on to anything for you. You're simply using their user interface. But just like you would get on a decentralized exchange, right? You hold, let's say if you want to swap from Ethereum to DevvE, you hold Ethereum, you swap it for DevvE. As soon as the block confirms, you've got your DevvE and you've swapped your Ethereum, right? So similar concept here. Second thing is, so if all the equities were actually tokenized on Robinhood, right? And this is where we want to start thinking, because you know how heavily regulated equities are specifically, right? And so there's going to be massive regulatory overhang that's there. The second thing that would be really difficult for an organization like Robinhood, if they wanted to use their same UI to integrate blockchain, is if you want to integrate almost any chain on the market that's currently out there, you're beholden to the vision of the original developer. And most of these chains are written in Solidity, they're written in Rust, they're written in Move. These are obscure, purpose-built languages that were built specifically for crypto and for AI. DevvE is built in C++, which is hands down one of the most, like, you're a first-year programming student, you know C++. And every transaction is initiated through a simple REST API. So what that means is, of course, Robinhood, the web app, is going to have an API accessible to them. They could literally plug and play into our blockchain immediately. Now, when they tokenize everything, it can live on chain, right? You actually have custody of it, which removes the potential for, FTX style debacles, right? So really what we're doing is we're making blockchain accessible to organizations that have wanted to use it for a long time. Like, for instance, the Australian Stock Exchange spent 7 years trying to upgrade their systems with blockchain and failed. Spent millions of dollars trying to do it. We've addressed these things not only in ways that work for all of these organizations, but in ways that we hold the patents on. And it's literally just a cup of secret sauce, man. It's the privacy, it's the fraud, theft, and loss, it's the speed, it's the C++ and the REST API, right? It's the customizability of every shard and the unified experience. You take all of those and you put those in one. Now you're speaking a completely different language. And now we're speaking the language of opening doors, right? We have multiple sovereign states that we're working with. Those are going to be announced here fairly soon. But we've really put our focus onto DevExchange. We had a big focus on ESG and impact assets for a while, and that's still in play. But underpinning the world's financial markets, and I know that if I'm talking to a crypto crowd, you guys have heard people say stuff like this before, like, the future finance, right? And all this happy jazz. But they're all just kind of Tasmanian deviling in the same environment, right? They're all just kind of spinning around a lot of the time doing the same thing a little bit better. We're talking about something completely different here, guys. We're talking about removing barriers to the world actually using blockchain. And we can't expect the world to adapt to our way of doing things. We've got to have something that's adaptable to them. And that's what DevvE is.
So with that said, and I did ask the users to ask their questions, Joshua Rodriguez says, how is this different than Cardano?
That's a great question. I'm actually not terribly familiar with Cardano. It just wasn't something I ever really dug into. So I don't know. Tell me some things about Cardano. I'll tell you about how it's different. I'm more than happy to.
Well, Cardano, like many of the blockchains out there, is a permissionless blockchain, which means anyone can write to it. Which is very different from DevvE, which is a permissioned blockchain. What is the difference between a permissionless blockchain and a permission blockchain? Like, I guess that's the foundation of one of the things that's different. Number one, transaction speeds are different with DevvE by a lot. But secondly, what's the difference between permission and permissionless?
Yeah, let's dig into it. So remember, I told you that we're a blockchain of blockchains, right? And we only deploy shards for purpose-built use cases, meaning if we have an enterprise client, let me tell you about enterprise clients, for example. So we had a top 50 insurance company that we were doing a pilot with, right? Now, when you go into an organization that is a multi-billion-dollar a year organization, and let's say that you want to use blockchain for data resiliency or data integrity, or let's say storing medical records or something of that nature, right? There are a few things that need to be put in place. If it's medical records, you have to have HIPAA compliance. HIPAA in the United States has, and maybe it's in other places around the world, but in the US specifically, there are very, very heavy regulations that have to do with how medical data can be stored, all the way down to the server that it's stored on, right? So on 99% of blockchains out there, medical data can't touch it. But if you go into a, let's say a Fortune 50 company or top 50 insurance company, like I just mentioned, and they want to use blockchain, they have a couple of different options, right? So the first is to look what's on the market and train somebody in Solidity. And if they don't have any permissioned data that they want to put on there, meaning it's not specialized, it's not something with regulations behind it, and they're okay with almost anyone validating blocks, then that's perfectly fine. Maybe they'll deploy a smart contract on one of the other networks. But for most companies, this isn't going to work for them. The second is, let's say they want to create their own blockchain, right? So they're going to spend possibly millions of dollars. They're going to bring in a new programming team. They're going to train them in a new language, right? And they really have no guarantee that this is going to work. Now, with DevvE, when we went and did this pilot, it was literally, tell us what you want. We will spin you up a shard with complete regulatory adherence. You don't have to train any new programmers because every single one you have already speaks this language. You can plug it into every single legacy system that you have, right? If you think we're going to go into a multi-billion-dollar-a-year organization that wants to use blockchain and say, you know what, I'm sorry, but that accounting system you're using, it's just not going to work. If you want to use our chain, it's great. Just change that accounting system company with 5,000 employees. They're not going to do it. They're going to tell you to kick rocks, right? With DevvE, we play nice with all of this. And that's really part and parcel for a lot of the reason that we've been able to open doors, is because when we go in places, we're not saying, here's how we do it. We're saying, show us how you'd like it done. And that's a completely different conversation.
Really, really good point there. Sailing, one of our Rainmaker family that's on the private Discord. If you don't know him yet, you're missing out. He says, when one clearinghouse moves to the blockchain, it's over.
This is a good point. And so the DTCC, I referenced them earlier, and I referenced them specifically because A, they're the biggest clearinghouse in the United States. But secondly, they have spent, I don't know how many years, attempting to upgrade their systems as well with blockchain technology. Now they're massive, right? So we gotta take into account, like, it's like steering a ship 10 times the size of a Titanic. It would be very, very difficult for them to do so. But with the contingent transaction sets and the mathematically instant settlement that I talked about earlier, these are two things very, very specifically that we came up with that enable us to do this, right? And there's something that nobody else has. And I know that sounds like fluff. It's not. When you actually see this in action, and you will, because we're going to be deploying DevExchange here not too far out. It removes such a large problem that operates under the hood. And it's not a big deal to you or I necessarily, but it's a huge deal to, we'll call them the rainmakers, the people that are the organizations that are making it happen in the world of finance, right? These clearinghouses, this counterparty risk is a big, big, big deal.
Well, a lot of times we only think about the problems involved in our lives, and we don't understand the problems like clearinghouses, right? So when Robinhood shut down trading on GameStop, it was because their clearinghouses were the ones that got a call from some big people that said, shut down your purchases of this. And so Robinhood wasn't filling the order. The clearinghouses were, and people didn't even know clearinghouses existed. They didn't think about these problems. So one of the ways you can make money as an investor is understanding what the problems are out there in the world, whether or not they directly, or whether or not you realize they directly impact you. And you invest in the companies that are solving their greater problems. I talked to somebody that works in U.S. government regulation, and I told them about DevvE and going to T0 settlement. And he was like, WTF, is that possible? Because if that's possible, every major financial institution is going to want that.
It's a big deal. It's a very, very big deal. And the reason that I paint the picture kind of the way that I did is because a lot of people ask me, they go, "Oh, you guys are building a DEX, huh?" And I'm like, no, not in the slightest, right? Yeah, you're going to maintain self-custody. Yeah, you'll have the experience of a centralized exchange, meaning limit orders, other things that you're only going to get on a centralized exchange. But there's so much more that's going into this. What we're going to be doing is all of these buzzwords y'all hear about, right, that are out there, specifically RWAs are one that I'm thinking of. We're going to be one of the first chains to actually enable this in a way that it underpins what's going on in the world of finance. Like I was on a Twitter Spaces the other day, and I love this girl. She was like, "Well, crypto adoption is happening. USDC is now available in the iPhone." Now, I have an e-commerce company, and I promise you, if 1 out of 300 people pay in crypto, I would be very, very surprised, because the bottom line is Visa and MasterCard are easier to do. For people to actually adopt blockchain technology, there's a few things that are going to happen. Number one, we're going to have to make it more convenient on the end user. It cannot be more difficult for people to use blockchain. It's just simply not going to happen. The second thing that I think is going to need to happen is kind of the same thing that happened with internet, right? We all use internet, and there's huge pieces of technology like HTTP, TCP/IP, DNS, which if you're like a real, tech guy, you probably know what those acronyms mean. But most of us use them every single day. Like, they enable what we do in internet, right? But it'd be really weird if I went home and my wife asked me, "What'd you do at work today?" And I said, "Well, I used the internet," like, we don't say that because it's implied. Literally everything we do is on the internet. And kind of the vision that I have and a lot of other people have is when blockchain is mass adopted, people aren't even going to talk. They're not even going to say that they're using it. It's just going to be implied, right? And the way that we get to that implication is we've got to build something that these major financial institutions, these major world players are willing to work with. And that's what DevvE is.
So it sounds like the combination of a number of things. And then I have a question. So
Sure.
of all, the transactions per second that it takes to really do business at scale. Because I'm going to tell you, Solana's can't even really reach 100,000 transactions per second. That's not going to cut it. Cardano might be able to, but it is a permissionless blockchain, which isn't HIPAA compliant because you can't have this data stored all over. So certain things can use Cardano, which is a lot of what regular people we think about. Enterprise blockchains, they don't want a permissionless blockchain once they understand it. They want a permission blockchain. And really, there's DevvE and there's Hedera Hashgraph. And those are options. I think Hedera's 10,000 transactions per second, maybe 50,000. So they're not truly a blockchain. They're a hash graph. But they do have some good financial partners along the way. But with DevvE, we're talking not just much faster speeds, but this idea of how to make everything talk together across the world. So you're seeing like there could be one type of exchange, decentralized exchange, that looks like a centralized exchange, but then anyone in the world could access it. And then it would be compliant to whatever the laws are. And you start to see how blockchain can be adopted across the world. Then, then you have to have something fast enough that you can tokenize all the real world assets and put them on it, and then have the transaction speeds that can literally handle it, because something that can only do 10,000 or 50,000 transactions per second can't handle that type of volume, especially if you're then having to bridge it all the time across the different shards. So if that's the case, though, why isn't BlackRock talking about DevvE? They're talking about tokenizing the world. Why is BlackRock not like, oh my gosh?
That's a great question. We actually have a former VP of BlackRock who's our head of impact at DevvE. I don't know why BlackRock's not talking about DevvE. I'm gonna make everyone that's watching here a promise. If you even got curious, like if this is your first time hearing about DevvE, or you heard about us in the past and you're like, I don't really know, I don't really get it, but you even got curious while hearing us chat today, and you tug on this thread, the next year of your life is going to be bananas, not just because we're in a banana bull zone, which we are, but we're going to be ranked up there with all the big boys. I can assure you of that. We're about to do something in this space that's not only never been done in this space, but it's never been done, period. So I hate to dance around it like that. But
I actually had a different answer. I asked Tom Anderson, who created the DevvE blockchain, that question, and he said they're working on a layer 2 ETH solution right now. They think that's the way, and he said they're going to find out that won't cut it. In the meantime, we're having discussions with not as big as BlackRock, but other companies And those discussions are going well. So he's like, we're much more likely to peel them off because right now their minds are still open. Like, we don't have a solution to this and we're looking for a solution. BlackRock thinks they have the right solution for this that they can control and then they can make everyone use. And it's not going to go for them like they think it's going to go for them.
I don't know. I'm not technical enough to speak on that either way. And that's one thing, like, you know, you mentioned Hedera, Cardano, like these are big organizations and they have done some things really freaking well. Like, you know, DevvE is, we're playing in a different realm here. We're not trying to target. Now, Hedera, I have mad respect for Hedera. Like they've done such an excellent job with what they're shooting for. But we're just kind of playing in a different realm here, right? Especially from Cardano.
Yeah. Saline, who did work in the financial industry for 30 years, often talked to many CEOs at big companies like at JP Morgan Chase and other things. He said he had a similar conversation about T0 settlement times with one of his banking contacts, I'm sure, that was like, holy shit, that is a big deal. A few other things in here, some questions. Is DevvE kind of super boost hyperledger? Difference between overledger API technology?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't know enough about hyperledger to speak on that accurately. You know, you could probably speak on that more intelligently than I could. I could probably go pull up some of their docs right now and let you know.
I don't know what it is good enough to then be able to differentiate it. I don't hardly know what it is at all. Jester Rune says, I wish I had more cash to buy. Chris asked a great question. When will you be announcing this partnership?
Great question, man. And our community has just been like, I love our community so much. Because this is coming very, very soon. And I know when it's coming and I can't tell you when it's coming and I want to tell you, but then it's kind of going to be like, all right, here comes front run town. And everyone's going to be trying to front run that. So I will tell you this is going to be this sort of thing where traditional media will be involved, right? Fox Business, CNBC, Bloomberg will be involved. It's going to be a big splash when it happens because it's the first time this particular organization has made a foray into blockchain, period.
That's good alpha. What new institutional clients have you on board and what kind of volume are they pushing through DevvE?
Great question, Chris. So right now, so we have a few shards that are deployed. We have 3 sovereign states. So we didn't really get into impact assets, and I don't really think we're going to have time to necessarily, but we have a sister company that is it's a publicly traded company on the NASDAQ called DevStream, and they're a carbon credit creation company. And originally the E in DevvE stood for ESG, right? Because, you know, Tom and Ray, they have history in impact assets and carbon credits, and there's a huge provenance and transparency issue there. So recently, Ray, our CEO, has been a UN delegate. He has been at the UN, I believe, 3 times over the last few months, speaking on behalf of the small island developing states. And so a few of the enterprises, I really wouldn't call them enterprises, they're governments. And so we have 3 governments that are going to be announced, I believe, fairly quickly after the big announcement comes in January. So once we get to that, you know, you guys will kind of see what we're putting together.
So what's funny is a lot of those companies that I invested in that saw 1,000x returns on their tokens, they always had substance, but it was almost kind of like this disbelief in their ideas were transformational, like, and they were leaders in this transformational idea. And it took a while for them to catch traction, and it built slowly, then very, very suddenly. So there's this disbelief phase where you're like, it sounds so good. If it's so true, why isn't price already gone 50x, 100x? And it's like, don't discount it because of that, especially when the awareness is super low, especially if it's something good enough that can catch awareness later, which is why I wanted to invite you to share with it. Like, I'm obviously a huge believer in DevvE. I hold a huge amount of DevvE tokens myself, big believer. When I first heard back in 2021 about DevvE, I said, that's impossible. You know, my friend called me up. He's actually here in the channel, Novelty Known. And he said, we go way back to like 2017. And he's like, hey, there's this blockchain company out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, that can do 8 million transactions per second. I told him that was impossible. I said, I would have heard of them. Nobody can do those kind of speeds. And he's like, no, it's true. And I was like, it's not true. I was like, but I'm open-minded. Put me in touch with them. I think it's BS. And then he put me in touch with Tom Anderson. I was like, holy cow. And that was before they had the DevvE exchange. I always felt like they had massive potential. They have a massively good team. Like Ray Quintana is an A-level player, Tom Anderson, A-level player, and they had several other ones. I was like, well, right people, right technology. Holy cow, I'm not going to disbelieve this just because it feels early. Now, that was 2021. You couldn't even buy the token then. It wasn't even viable till earlier this year because they weren't going to just do an ICO. They could have in 2017 done an ICO, sell a bunch of tokens, raise a whole bunch of funds. They pretty much self-funded between them and some people that they knew and bootstrapped it all the way through 2020, like until they did the token launch recently. So they kind of developed in stealth. Austin, thank you for joining us. Any final words before we then jump into the private stream?
No. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And I know that, like, man, you know, my job is I'm kind of charged with painting the vision of DevvE, which is, admittedly, it's a really, really big one, right? And in the world of crypto where there's just so much vaporware and hot air being blown at you in every direction, I do realize sometimes how this sounds. But I want to make you guys a promise. Very, very soon here. No, we won't have to have any conversations about whether DevvE is legitimate or like, how come I haven't heard of you yet or anything like that, right? Pretty soon that's going to be done. And it's going to be explained to us in more detail exactly what you did and how you did it. And that's coming very soon. But if anyone gets enough curiosity about them to tug on this thread, I promise you, you're going to be along for a ride, a real ride.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everyone who's catching this live stream is going to remember this day. Thanks so much.
Sure. Thanks, buddy.
All right, I will send you the new link in Telegram in just a few minutes. For everyone watching, got this wrap for you. These are the principles I live by in the crypto space.
Came into this space chasing all of the gains, chasing the pumps and all of the hype trains. But like in life, shit, right before you could, was told to buy when it was pouring like a rainmaker should. I buy when it's down, don't chase the boats that I miss, cause I always make the time in mind. I stick the one out cause I'm patient like that, and I'll wait for the right time. I sell when it's high, I buy when it's low. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm just a rainmaker running the show. Calculated investments, I don't lead with my heart. The principles are simple, they're leaving a mark. Buy when it's boring, just gotta be smart. I sell when it's hype, like all the channels they pump it. That's when I was selling the parabolic and dump it. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes the time fly by, years going so fast. The game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Time is never better, the time like the present. This next 5 years is a gift and it's feeling like heaven. I'm committed to learn, to study and to know that nothing comes easy but with knowledge the game show. Sticking out this wrong can soon become a bear market. Learning and growing and when it's slow will be the target. They say it's come out, Bitcoin is dead. The massive decreases can get to your head. Sticking around, the time is better. I'm strong like that, I'll let the others be fretters. 2 years time the ball will bring back the gains. That makes it worth the effort cause here comes the rain. So let's go rainmakers, let's make it all happen. Let go of the hate, let the haters be crapping. I'm here for 5 years, let's do this together. The time is right, the time could be better. They call me rich, they call me smart. I'm a rainmaker, making my own start. I'm with the future, learning the past. Makes the time fly by, years going so fast. The game plan is mine, I'll own it now. When I reach the top, haters asking me how. Cause I'm a rainmaker, investments I love. And I follow what I learn, not relying on luck. Haters be hating.